My name is Austin Dressman. I'm the Community and Events Manager here at Engaging Networks. Before we jump into things, I wanted to give a quick intro to our speaker today. Mitch Stein is the head of strategy for Chariot, which is a charitable payments company revolutionizing the philanthropic financial system. And at Chariot, nonprofits can seamlessly incorporate donor-advised fund gifts or DAF fund gifts into their fundraising flows, solving the challenges of tracking and stewarding DAF donors effectively. Before joining Chariot, Mitch had a successful 7-year career as an investment banker at Goldman Sachs, was the founder of Pond, a platform and community built to streamline how nonprofit leaders connect with software, services, and training, and to better power their missions. And now he's even a co-host with the Nonprofit Show podcast, which is really cool. And in 2023, Mitch consulted for social impact tech startups, which eventually led him to Chariot. And now he's dedicated to making transformative changes in philanthropy through innovative strategies and solutions. And some of these great subjects he's going to touch on today, and all the amazing things that Chariot's doing. And we're so happy to have them and to have Mitch with us here today. So without further ado, I'll hand things off to you, Mitch.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate the kind intro there, Austin. I'm sure everyone on this session has heard of donor-advised funds before, or you probably wouldn't have joined. But we're going to go in deep here on both what's been happening in this space, like why has it become such a hot topic that you probably have been hearing a lot more about in the last year. And then we'll talk more specifically about the product that Chariot built called DAFpay, and where we're seeing success and just how easy it is to use with engaging networks. I'll also just say, since I'm the only speaker here, please don't make me talk continuously for an hour. Interrupt me with questions. Austin's going to be kind of managing the chat and helping to surface your questions. So you do not need to wait till the end. Please ask them in real time. And even though I'm the one speaking, I want to keep this as conversational as possible. So without further ado, we'll jump right in, because this session is all about getting more from donor-advised funds with DAFpay and engaging networks. So just so everyone knows, we have a live integration with engaging networks for the donor-advised fund payment option called DAFpay. It's extremely easy to set up. So anyone who's using that product, you hopefully will want to have that turned on by the end of this session today. I alluded to a bit of our agenda before, but this is what you have to expect today. We're starting off at the market and opportunity level. Going to be diving into a lot of data and research there. Then we're going to talk a little bit about exactly what DAFpay is and how it works with engaging networks. And then how, even once you have it enabled, that's not the end. Like with every kind of fundraising, there's also a lot of strategic elements to maximize that technology. So we'll talk through all the things you can do to get your team on board and really be maximizing your DAF fundraising. For starters, just in case anyone is a little new or you don't want to ask exactly what a donor-advised fund is, it's a tax-advantaged account for charitable savings. So I think the most relatable thing for people is to think of it like a 401k or an HSA, where in those instances, you're setting aside funds for later use for retirement or healthcare costs, and there are tax advantages to doing so. And you can have that money invested while it's in that account, so it keeps growing with the market. It's a similar structure for DAFs. People can contribute cash or securities like stock and bonds, or even less liquid assets like real estate into a donor-advised fund account. They get that tax deduction for the full value up front. Also avoid any capital gains tax if they were securities they contributed. And then it grows tax-free in the account, and they make grants out of that account to nonprofits over time. If anyone has questions on that, please don't hesitate to ask. But that's kind of the starting points for today, is exactly what a DAF is and how it works. I think the reason we're talking about it is that it is growing so rapidly and is the fastest growing vehicle in philanthropy. There's currently $230 billion that are in donor-advised funds. That's the latest data we have as of the end of 2022. And that amount grew by over 85% in just 5 years. And it's also really expanded who is using a DAF. So there's over 3 million people that are using donor-advised funds for their philanthropy. And that's also expanded more than 2.3x in 5 years. So we don't see these kinds of numbers in nonprofit fundraising, which is why this is getting so much attention. And the most important thing for you all is on the right here, we talk about, okay, there's all this money going into it and people using it, but how is it benefiting nonprofits? And there's been over $50 billion granted out of DAFs just in 2022. And that number is up to almost a fifth of philanthropy is coming directly from DAFs, from 7% just 5 years ago. So it is drastically shifting the landscape of philanthropy and is the core source of growth in an environment where, we just had the Giving USA report and figures come out about 2023 earlier this week, and still, pretty flat, a little negative when adjusting for inflation for individual giving. And that includes DAF giving. So we know DAF giving is growing like this. That means non-DAF individual giving is also declining even more significantly. So this is a really important thing to be focused on. Any questions on like how DAFs work or how the market is expanding before we move on? Austin, is there any in the chat I should answer?
Not yet. Yeah, I think you're covering all the ground here, and it's really informative so far. So this is great.
Great. So another question we usually get is just, okay, so understand this dynamic is happening, but why exactly? Like what changed? Why did this happen all of a sudden, it feels like? There's several trends that are contributing to it. And these, I think, are the most important three. As you saw, there's over 3 million users with a DAF. That's more than just the ultra high net worth billionaires that might come to mind when you think of donor advised funds. This is being much more broadly adopted and democratized for three key reasons. Number one is that there's more accessible platforms and structures to use a DAF. So historically, donor advised funds had really high minimums, like you had to have $50,000 or $100,000 to set up an account, and they were only at these big banks. But now we see these really common brokerage firms like Fidelity or Schwab that have minimum requirements of zero. So zero to set up an account, minimum gift size of $50. So it's geared to a much more like everyday intentional donor. And we also have new platforms that are way more accessible to someone that just wants to start a DAF account because they like the structure and the benefits. So things like Charity Vest or Daffy are both startups that we partner with, and they let people set up DAFs really easily, and the tech is really, really good. It's also begun to be offered as an employee benefit. So a lot of big employee benefit providers and new startups are saying to employers, you can offer a DAF just like you would a 401k or an HSA to your employees. And that way, you can also offer matching into a donor advised fund. So more and more companies are opting to do that, even instead of matching gifts, where they review and match each individual gift by an employee versus an automatic match into a DAF account that just doubles the employee's giving capacity. And the last piece is just the tax code changes that happened in 2017 under President Trump, which drastically increased the minimum write-off size or your minimum deduction for when you're filing your taxes. So now for a couple, I think it's close to $20,000. Otherwise, it's not worth itemizing your charitable donations. So people have started to use a DAF if they're kind of in a gray area where it's like, well, I give maybe $5,000 a year, but if I put 25K into a DAF, then I will get a tax benefit for that, and I can make my 5K plus distributions each year from that account. So we can go into more detail if people want to dig into the tax technicals, but not my intended focus today. Just know that that's been a driver of this drastic change.
Mitch, can I ask you really quick? We had one question come up about the structure of the funds and some of the rules around the funds. How long can DAF donors hold their funds without distribution to charity? I don't know if there's an answer to that on the spot.
For sure. No, that's what I'm here for. There is no universal legal requirement. Most of the major DAFs do have their own policies and procedures. So like Fidelity, for instance, which is the largest, If you go a year without making a grant, they have a specific outreach to ask why and encourage you to do so. If you go 2 years without making a grant, they actually will make a grant to the Fidelity charity on your behalf. So there's like a extreme incentive to make sure that there aren't like dormant accounts. And I forget the exact number of years, if it's 4 or 5, if account is completely dormant, they will actually just reclaim those assets and grant them centrally out of the Fidelity charitable account. So that's just one example. It varies a lot depending on the DAF provider, but there is no required payout. I will say the National Philanthropic Trust, which is the entity that aggregates and reports on total market data. So the data we went through on this slide here, these are all stats that are coming directly from them. The payout rate, meaning like what percentage of the assets at the beginning of the year end up being dispersed by the end of the year. And that rate has been over 20% per year since they started reporting in 2009. So while it's a common criticism of donor advised funds, certainly that there's no universal legal requirement, in practice, it is still a much faster moving vehicle for philanthropy than even private foundations, which do have that 5% requirement. But then the payout rate tends to be right near that 5% requirement as opposed to something greater. I think that's just attributable to the fact that foundations are meant to be perpetual vehicles. And that's generally not how people are using DAFs, generally thinking about them like a charitable wallet. Certainly there are cases that someone might use this as a foundation alternative, but most of the time it's an efficiency, both taxed and ease of management for just managing your philanthropy. And it maximizes, people often think about it, they're maximizing their generosity, because when they're getting the tax deduction and saving on those capital gains taxes, or it's also growing in the account, they end up greatly increasing their giving over time, kind of in spite of themselves, even if they weren't intending on it. And we'll talk through some of those things as we go through the presentation today too. But great question.
Yeah, that's a good question. And so it sounds like it kind of varies by institution, potentially like policies they have in effect. Okay. And kind of related, unrelated, but just while we're on the same track, someone asked how is this being presented like to individuals with money in, say, they're saying Fidelity or Schwab Charitable, are they being given these options? Like, are they being presented these philanthropic giving options? Do you know like kind of like what they're seeing on their end, basically?
Yeah, again, there's over 1,000 different donor advised funds. So there isn't a universal answer. There are a couple really big ones like Fidelity, Schwab, and Vanguard make up over 50% of the market. And I would say that it's, for most people, it's less centralized, like a single entity that they're getting a message from, because usually people have a financial advisor that's involved in the process. And so it's often a financial advisor that's making the suggestion of like, hey, you do a lot of giving every year. Here's a way that you could more efficiently manage that. And so I would say that's, well, it's impossible to know what every financial advisor, how they're presenting that. I think that's generally the messaging, is it's like a really efficient way to manage your giving, to do it all in one place centrally. You hold yourself accountable to whatever your goals are around giving, because, you know, an important thing to remember about the psychology of donating is, you know, separate and apart from DAFs. Anytime that I'm solicited for a gift, I'm making two decisions simultaneously. I'm making a decision on a budgetary decision. How much money do I want to part with right now? And my second decision is, do I want to allocate it to this person or cause or organization? And those two decisions are kind of weighing against each other. The budgeting decision is like, oh, how much money do I want to give? And the second, that's like the joy of giving. It's like, oh, I want to support this thing and feel great about it. And so every time someone has to make two decisions at once, it's kind of slowing them down and reducing that positive impact. And the really cool thing about DAFs is you're making a decision. I want to set this amount of money aside for philanthropy, and you're making a budgeting decision up front. Like for me, I contribute $100 a month into my donor advised fund, and my employer actually matches that every month. So I'm basically setting a floor for my giving each year. And so that happens in the background. I'm not even thinking about it. And then when I get solicited for a gift to donate to a friend's bike ride or for a friend's birthday campaign, then I'm allocating. All I'm doing is like, oh, since I'm here, I end up making larger gifts, and I'm just having that joy of giving moment. And so it has a really positive impact on how people feel about their giving. We'll get into the reasons why it doesn't without DAFpay. That's a lot of what the presentation is today.
That's perfect. Thanks, Mitch. Yeah, thanks for letting us detour off into that for a minute.
We can detour in any direction people want, so do not be shy. So I was kind of alluding to some of this, but when we talk about, okay, DAFs are expanding, and now we understand a bit about the dynamic in the market, but like, why should nonprofits care or pay more attention? These are really valuable donors. So while it has been democratized, it's not just ultra high net worth folks. It still is a intentional and generally pretty well off and affluent audience that uses DAFs. It's over 3 million people, and the average account size is over $170,000, according to new research this year. I will say at Fidelity, you have this down at the bottom, their median account size is closer to 20K. Still a really good, you want to be talking to someone that has $20,000 sitting there waiting to be donated to philanthropy, but it's not just the ultra wealthy. Also, each gift, this is again a Fidelity stat, their average gift size is close to $5,000. So you're talking about something that's over 20x the standard credit card gift someone would give online. And it's a whole new cohort of people using these DAFs. Most of them are relatively recent. Over 25% of them have opened the account since 2020. And I would say the other misunderstanding people have a lot is that they're like, oh, these are older individuals. Maybe they're not as tech savvy. They're just calling someone to make a gift. But Fidelity in particular, over 97% of their donors manage their DAFs and their giving in their portal. Like, they're digitally savvy. Don't count them out when you think about digital fundraising. So this is something that is a total sneak peek. So this is not even publicly published yet, which is why they're kind of rough numbers in here. But I have been working with K2D Strategies for the past 6 months on a benchmark study. And it's the first of its kind where we have been able to look at DAF giving data from the perspective of nonprofits. So we took in historical giving data from 20 nonprofits around the country, some of the largest. So the data set was like 100 million historical transactions. And in that, we were able to look at the dynamics between DAF donors in a nonprofit's data file and their non-DAF donors, and what happens once they start giving from a DAF. And there's really exciting results coming from that. We're going to publish it in about 3 weeks. So definitely stay tuned for those updates. But some of the things that you can have on your radar is looking at what has the change been in DAF donors. Like, we hear about all this growth, but are nonprofits actually seeing that growth? And what we saw on average across the 20 participating organizations, that in 5 years, their number of DAF donors grew by over 100%, while their non-DAF donors in the same time period declined by 5%. Like, those numbers are just so striking. And when we think about the impact, the average gift of a DAF donor was over $1,000. And by the way, this is excluding 25K plus gifts. So there's obviously going to be some really large outliers. So we intentionally wanted to know what is just like that mid-tier and under audience that's using DAFs for giving. Their average gift's over $1,000. And that's compared to the average non-DAF gift of $69 in this data set across all the participating organizations. So 16x the size. The other thing that was super interesting is we could actually see what happens when a donor goes from supporting a nonprofit with, say, a credit card, a non-DAF method, and then they start supporting them from their donor advised fund and their increase in giving was over 100%. So over doubling how much they support the exact same organization once they use their DAF instead of a credit card. And we'll get into some more evidence that where we've seen that specifically with DAFpay in some of our current customers. But just wanted to highlight these findings, which I imagine a lot of you are intuitive. It's probably what's happening and you've seen within your own organization, but it's cool to see at an aggregate kind of cross-organizational level. So we've gone through a...
And if it's possible to take a question.
Yeah.
Are there any months that are better than others to highlight or push for donor advised funds, fund options from donors? So I'm thinking like our clients who want to, email their supporters and say, hey, now's a great time to give from your donor advised fund. Are there any sort of suggestions you have there?
Yeah. One of again, this will be in the benchmark study where we can actually look at seasonality of receipt of gifts. December is still the busiest time, but it's a lot less stark of a difference than non-DAF giving. And you think about the reason why, you don't get the tax write-off when you make a grant out of a DAF. You got your tax receipt when you made your contribution. So you don't need to time your distributions, your disbursements out of your DAF at year end when you're planning for your taxes. So they tend to be a lot more balanced throughout the year. So I would just say that you don't need to isolate requests around DAF giving to end of year, for example. Be doing that often throughout the year, and whenever you're doing a campaign, you don't know who within your file you'll be reaching that hasn't used a DAF before but has one. Actually, Q1 is a big period for DAF giving. It's the second busiest after Q4, and that makes sense because a lot of people are putting funds into their DAF in December when they're doing their tax planning and they get that tax receipt. And now they're kind of re-upped to start the new year and start making gifts then. But great question. So DAFs sound great, right? And we're all probably like, okay, what's the point? What do we have to talk about? Just tell people to use their DAF. But there are a lot of problems in how folks functionally use their donor advised fund to support your organization. They're hard for donors to use. They're hard for you all, the fundraisers, to steward because it's very delayed when you get the money and information, and you generally get pretty paltry information, maybe a mailing address, but typically don't even have a name or an email. And then because of that, it's also difficult for your finance team to reconcile all these things. When we talk about the DAF donor journey, you use Engaging Networks or another fundraising tool that is spending all their time trying to optimize this flow and make it as easy as possible for someone to check out and make a gift. When someone's in your DAF account, it's not the same. Those providers do not have the same customer. And if anyone on the call here hasn't seen what it's like to make a DAF gift, I honestly really encourage you to set up your own donor advised fund. There are a lot of options that have no minimums. You can start with $50 just to inform yourself of the process and go make a gift. I can follow up with the list of those, some of those easy ones to use, but it typically takes 20 steps to ultimately complete a gift. And that varies depending on the quality of the platform. But even the best ones are going to take several minutes to go, okay, now I've been inspired. Let me go to my Fidelity portal, log in, and then I need to find the organization. I just heard a story, by the way, from a nonprofit who had a board member make a $100,000 DAF gift to the wrong nonprofit because their names were similar and they had to look them up within their portal. So that is real. It happens all the time. And that's a huge pain point for your donor trying to find it. And each one of these steps is just more friction, which results in not as many gifts being completed. And from the nonprofit's experience, you're just in the dark. Someone got inspired by your campaign and then they went to their DAF provider. You have no idea what happens next. Did they submit it? How much? Who is this? All you rely upon is a check arriving in the mail. Most likely, it varies between the DAF providers. Most of them are sending physical checks, and that's going to arrive in the mail weeks or even months later. And typically just comes with a mailing address, sometimes a name, oftentimes a fund name, but the fund name can be the Smith Giving Fund. It's impossible to identify. And then the tracking and reconciliation is really difficult. You all probably understand this, so I'm just reiterating what you already know. And so that's where DAFpay comes in. And what this is a payment option, a true payment option sitting right next to PayPal, Venmo, and credit card, where people can complete a DAF gift within your donation form in 3 clicks without ever leaving your website. And you get all that information immediately, automatically synced to your Engaging Networks platform. So that means their name, their email, and the gift size automatically there for you to easily reconcile when those gifts arrive. I have the screenshots here, but I think it will be most effective for me to share I can show you an Engaging Networks client that's doing this and walk through a full demo. So let me flip over there real quickly.
Mitch, while you're doing that, did the board member get their donation back after they
No, they said, they were like, I guess they can keep it.
Oh my gosh. Can't imagine.
It was a youth services organization in New York City, and the name was similar to a youth services organization in Martha's Vineyard. And they just got a surprise $100,000 DAF gift from a Goldman Sachs partner. So no one wants to be in that setting. And but to that point, thank you for bringing that up again, Austin, because when the DAFpay button is on your form, so like we're here at Lutheran World Relief, they don't need to make that selection. It's already automatically selected to your EIN because you have your account with us in Engaging Networks. So that is a huge benefit of having this in your own domain in your own territory. But here's an Engaging Networks client, Lutheran World Relief. You're going through the donation form here, put in name and email, put in donor advised fund when I select these different payment options. And that's when you click DAFpay, which launches our modal. From here, you can scroll through or search for a specific provider. Like I said, there's over 1,000 that are out there. Then I click Fidelity. And here I'm just going to go over to our sandbox so I can complete a full transaction to show you. The exact same thing. I'm going to click Fidelity, and I put in my username and password. And then this is the final pane. And that username and password is their account login with Fidelity. They don't need to have a DAFpay account. There's no new steps. This is all with their existing DAF details. They log in. They're reminded of their account balance, which is super important. We're highlighting to them just how much money they set aside to give to charity, and then confirming a donation amount. Name, email is already in there, and they click donate, and they're done. You can redirect them to your standard thank you page. You'll be able to see that gift both on your Chariot portal and in the Engaging Networks portal. And you'll know who that donor was immediately with their email so that you can reach out to them and start to steward them properly. It's not a very long demo because that's just how easy it is. But if there's any questions specific to that functionality, I'm happy to hang here or come back to them.
We've got a few questions coming in here.
Awesome.
Can what you just showed us do recurring DAF gifts?
That is coming in. I can't give you a specific date, as anyone in the product development world knows, but very soon. That is like a week's thing, not a month's thing.
Perfect. So forthcoming. That's great. Is the donation amount auto-populated when you go through that route?
Yeah, great question. So, and this is actually relevant for Engaging Networks because today all of the integrations have been as a checkout option, like I showed you on Lutheran World Relief. And I think it's tomorrow or next week, we're also going to be releasing an express option, which was like the example I walked through where I click DAFpay at the top of a form. And that's also what's shown here. I just flipped back to the presentation. So on the right-hand side, this is the final pane. That's what it looks like for the express checkout, because we can actually auto-populate a suggested gift size based on their account balance. So like, I'll let that sink in for a second. We have to know that they have $120,000 to say yes, no to clear a request. They tried to make a $150,000 gift, we wouldn't be able to process it. We can also use that information to say they have $120,000. Let's not start them off with a $100 suggested gift. Let's say $5,000. Really powerful. We can also display these boost options that are dynamically rendered. And we actually see that over 30% of donors do end up boosting their gift when they have that suggestion. Again, we're anchoring them to their total account balance, which is just super powerful. Because most people don't know. If you ask them, someone has a DAF, how much is in your DAF? They wouldn't know because it's in the market. It's moving all the time. They might have like automatic contributions happening like I do for my credit card, but I don't even have it top of mind. So it's a really powerful reminder. But if it's a checkout option, it pulls in whatever detail was already put into the form.
Yeah, that makes things really streamlined. I think that's a great feature. Can you show us actually? I don't know if you can go back to where it was when you were walking us through, but and maybe this is just an answered question too, that you can give us right away, is do all the community foundations appear in like a drop down as you're going through the form here?
Yeah, so it's scrolling and searchable.
Okay, perfect. Okay, and then another one here. Oh yeah, just actually same question there. Sorry. This one's more for our team, but I'll just kind of raise the question: is the Express checkout being released in the next Engaging Networks release on Friday? Marcy, do we have any insights there? I don't want to speak to that inaccurately, I should say. So,
Not that I'm aware of. Hopefully you can hear me. Sounds like it is slated for a future release, so not this Friday. So TBD on that one.
And you can thank you for that, Marcy. You can reach out to your account success manager too to maybe get some more specific timelines, or if you have specific needs for that, please don't hesitate to do that. So. Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Mitch. Appreciate it. I think that's the question. Point.
Great. And one final thing on this page before we move on is the average gift that we see through DAFpay is over $1,000. And that's been pretty consistent, pretty much every month this year. So really, really valuable compared to your average non-DAF gift. Two other things on the implementation with Engaging Networks. There's no barrier to get started. There's no upfront cost. There's no subscription. We have a standard processing fee, just like a credit card, but there's nothing that you need to pay upfront. And once it's enabled, that's automatically charged. If you are anticipating higher volume, some of the larger customers do opt to have a subscription plan, which does result in kind of a lower effective processing fee. But you can talk to our team or the Engaging Networks team if you think that might be relevant for you. But for anyone that wants to get started, you don't have anything that you need to wait on. It couldn't be easier to get going. And similarly, the actual steps to do so, you can claim your Chariot account on givechariot.com in about a minute. Then you just need to turn DAFpay on within your Engaging Networks portal. And our last suggestion is make sure that it's implemented on that main donate form. So both our team and the Engaging Networks success team are happy to help with any questions that come up, but hopefully that is pretty straightforward. Any questions on the Engaging Networks implementation before I move on to some success stories?
One kind of specific question here about that. Says someone mentioned they may have missed this, and I actually don't know the answer to it myself either. So I'm not sure if it was covered, but is there a transaction created when someone completes the form with the DAF form? If so, what is the transaction type?
Yeah, so it's created in your Engaging Network form. I guess I'm not sure the exact language affiliated with it. I would assume the type is DAF gift, but that might be just a technical question that you might need to follow up on.
Yeah, I'll ask if any of our product team are in the chat on this particular webinar here, if they wouldn't mind weighing in. If you know what the transaction type is, that would be helpful. And if not, we can get back to you. But there we go, Marcy,
Great.
right there. Didn't even have a chance to finish my sentence, and she's there with the answer. That's great. Thanks, Marcy. And real quick, I want to just mention we do charge our normal processing fee as far as any transaction goes, but this is a free functionality to put DAF into your account, into your forms. Your Engaging Networks account is free. It's just the standard processing fee that we have for any transaction. So if that makes sense, I just had a question come out there a few times. So, and we also have one.
Also,
other... Oh, sorry. Go on, Mitch.
No, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, it was somebody's just asking, maybe this is later or something we can talk about later, is are we going to be covering any of Chariot's integration partners in this particular webinar?
Yeah, I think it'd probably just be easiest for me to send the list because there's a lot of them. So I will drop that into the chat for Maggie.
Perfect. And also slides. I know you have some stuff that's not published yet for your benchmark report. You might need to modify, but otherwise, if there's any, are we able to share any of the other aspects of what you're sharing here?
Yep, for sure. Can pass it over. And I know there's a lot of links that we included in there. And then I just saw Greg had asked additional costs for adding this, just to make sure it was clear again. There's no additional cost.
Perfect.
Okay.
I think we're good for success stories.
Great.
We can come back to some of these other ones, I should say, later. So just as a heads up to everybody.
Sure. Awesome. So I would say the important thing for people to know, now we've covered why it's important and how exactly you implement with Engaging Networks, is just the value here and how it's been demonstrated and how we can make the most of it. There's historically DAF giving was very separated from the online giving flows. And I just think it's important to reset now that you have a DAF payment option within your digital giving environments to think about, oh, now I should really be focusing on highlighting DAF giving to my audience, be that at events, and make sure they know when they go to an online form that they can make a DAF contribution there. And what you'll find is that you'll have so many either net new donors or first-time DAF donors because they would have just made a credit card gift. And I think that's the biggest opportunity here. If you're currently getting DAF support, yes, one of them might use this button, and yes, they'll likely make a larger gift because of how streamlined it is and the ways that we increase gift size with the design. But the biggest opportunity is all of the new DAF donors that you can source that we're otherwise going to give with a credit card. And that's really the important thing in your strategy and emphasizing DAF giving in those other settings, and just making it easy. It is going to result in larger gifts and just a huge sign that now, even if the gift wasn't $10,000, maybe it's $500, but you now know that that person has a DAF, and that's someone that's worth exploring further and engaging with deeper. So 2 examples I want to talk through from 2 nonprofits that we work with that have had some really exciting results. One is the Pan Mass Challenge, which is a bike ride across the state of Massachusetts. It's actually the largest athletic fundraiser in the country. And even since I finished these slides earlier this morning, they actually crossed over the $1 million raised in DAFpay gifts just this year mark. That's from over 1,500 gifts, and their average gift size was over $650. So if you might be thinking or wondering, like, this is new, are people really using this? It's happening at high volume, and they are really a leader in the industry, but this is the future. They've been emphasizing and promoting DAF giving for a decade, just implemented DAFpay this year and saw a 30% increase in DAF revenue. They now see that of their overall DAF giving, over 36% of it is happening through DAFpay. And for the amount that they grew in total year over year, 57% of that growth is attributable directly to DAF giving. So like this is the source of growth for them that they're capitalizing on. Another really cool example that I'm sure folks have heard of or familiar with is March of Dimes. And there's two important things I would highlight here. Is this was a relatively short period of implementation that kind of came on the end of their big peer-to-peer campaign, but they had the payment option in two places. They had it on a ways to give page, which is obviously a little bit buried and not in a standard checkout flow. And they had it on their peer-to-peer page for March for Babies for a much shorter period of time. And they saw almost 60 gifts total in that time period through DAFpay, but there were over 6 times more gifts when it was a checkout option. So that's the importance of that implementation piece and making sure it's an obvious, visible, well-placed payment option on your standard form. Their average gift size was $633. The other really cool dynamic is that we were able to dig in and go donor by donor through that list and what their historical activity was with the organization. 50% of the donors that used DAFpay were net new to March of Dimes, had never donated to them before. And I think that would be really surprising to a lot of people. And the fact is that Stripe recently published a report actually that they could, through their research, they found that 81% of cart abandonment is attributable to people not having their preferred payment option. So I'll let that sink in. If you don't have DAFpay on your forms, people who want to pay with their DAF, 81% of the time are going to leave. And so you're losing your most valuable group of donors. Even the folks that weren't net brand new to the organization, another 40% of that 57 donors were first-time DAF donors. So they'd previously given with a credit card, and this is their first time using a DAF and did so through DAFpay. The average increase from their prior credit card gift to their first DAFpay gift was 8x. So again, once people start using a DAF from their credit card, it's extremely beneficial to the organization. And I think what it also goes to show you, you have DAF donors in your file today, no question. And they're giving with a credit card because it's easier. And that's what makes this such a big opportunity. I'm going to go quickly through this last piece just because I know we have still some questions we want to get through. So I'll try to save 10 minutes for more Q&A. But the last thing I just want to describe here is I think most organizations don't have a DAF strategy today. They might have a mail strategy, a digital strategy, and they don't have a strategy specific to DAFs. And I'm going to lay out a case for why it's time that you should and how you can go about it. You know, historically, the reason there wasn't a DAF strategy was there wasn't a whole lot you could do. You know, these gifts just sort of showed up in the mail and you're happy when they did, and you just relied on donors who wanted to give that way to just do it. But now it's really important to be actively seeking out and cultivating those DAF donors and those relationships and improving the processes through which you're soliciting and receiving those gifts, and just encouraging people to use a DAF and educating, providing value to your donors and educating them about what DAFs are and why they're valuable, because it results in bigger gifts to your organization. There's 3 parts to that strategy, which again, I'm going to go over quickly and we can dig in further in some questions. But first is increasing the education level within your own organization, especially the executive team and the board. The awareness of DAFs in the general public is still pretty low. It's like less than 20%. And that's probably not even that much better in nonprofits. We're still educating a lot of people about what a donor advised fund is. So just make sure everyone's on board, and then just be staying on top of these figures, right? This benchmark study we're publishing, I put out a ton of content on LinkedIn of all the research that we're leading and success we're seeing for nonprofits. So just kind of tune in and start to pay more attention. The second is around promotion and discussion with your donors. So start including DAFs within an email campaign that just reminds people, hey, if you got a donor advised fund, you can use that too. And lean into saying that more often than not. Don't over optimize exactly which singular campaign makes sense to use that in. These donors are supporting everywhere, and it doesn't hurt to start to talk about it more. And the last bit is your data tracking. This is worth its own 2-hour webinar that, especially going through this benchmark study, I've learned a ton about how few nonprofits are tracking this data both legally correctly, and then just what's actually useful for them to be able to analyze and review and steward. So I would put a big disclaimer out there that as you're seeing these increasing DAF gifts, make the investment to align with your gift processing and your database team to make sure everyone is on the same page about the exact ways to do so. I'm going to skip through this. This is just obviously make sure everyone's aware, especially after you do your implementation. Share that with your team so that they all know that this capability is there. Make sure you're including it across all that promotion. Make sure you're bringing it up in your one-on-one donor conversations. Don't be shy. And I'm going to hit on a couple key things on the data front. Again, this is probably worth a whole nother webinar, Austin, that we could talk through with people. But make sure that provider, Fidelity, Schwab, et cetera, they're getting the hard credit and the donor gets the soft credit. When the donor sets up a DAF account, they are legally relinquishing quote unquote control of that fund, of those funds. The DAF is technically the one dispersing the money to you, but it is the donor recommending it, and the donor is who you have a relationship with and you want to thank. So getting that right is really important. You also want to name the actual provider in your database. We see this a lot where people will say the name of a financial advisor in the DAF provider column, and yet that's not actually who manages the DAF. Having a yes/no flag around DAFs is, again, really helpful. And don't include other entities that they might use what is technically a donor advised fund from a legal structure perspective. So matching gifts, for example, Benevity is a DAF, but that's not a DAF account that people have individual accounts at and they recommend gifts out of. It's not the same thing. And we saw this in the benchmark study, completely commingled with matching gifts, crowdfunding platforms that disperse through a DAF like Network for Good, payroll giving like United Ways, they would track that in the same place, or even just general corporate donations. Again, this is a really meaty topic, but I couldn't leave this conversation without putting that out there. I'm happy to take questions in the last 9 minutes or so. We can just hold on this page, which is my calls to action for everybody, in addition to getting set up with DAFpay on Engaging Networks.
Perfect. No, there's so much here, Mitch. This is really great stuff, and we honestly probably need to take you up on that follow-up webinar at some point. But just to confirm a few things that were kind of happening in the chat there, we've got some great responses from Elon, who's a colleague of Mitch over at Chariot, who's given some insights on some of those questions that involve, some of the larger, higher level strategy behind why this is happening the way it is. Why some of these financial institutions are doing things in this way. Some of the things that Mitch touched on there. So just pointing everyone to that direction for a minute, but also wanted to call out. I confirmed with our product team about our processing fees and relating that to Chariots. It is 0.5% on Engaging Networks, and then it's 2.9 on Chariot's side. So pretty standard as far as having a payment gateway, working with the payment gateway goes. But obviously, if you have any questions that are specific to that, you can reach out to your account success manager or to Chariot if need be. But maybe just start with your account success manager, because it's probably something Engaging Networks related that we can kind of get you some information on. That being said, kind of just going down the punch list of some of these questions. Is this available at this point for Canadian clients and within the Canadian market?
Unfortunately, no. We're only supporting US DAFs right now. It's certainly on our radar. It's just we still have a lot of ground to cover in the US, but we'll be getting there.
Perfect. Someone's asking, does the transaction settle within the DAF widget in the form, or would they still need to receive a payment from the company?
You receive the gifts in the same way that you do today if someone makes a Fidelity gift, for example. So that differs depending on the DAF. Fidelity can send ACH if you sign up with them directly. So you may already be receiving ACH, Fidelity gifts via ACH. Schwab sends a check, an individual check for each individual DAF gift. Vanguard uses PayPal. So it's however you're receiving those funds today. We are facilitating the initiation. And when those funds arrive, they'll come with a tracking ID that matches up to your dashboard. So it makes the reconciliation for your gift processing and finance team much, much easier, because you've already created a record with their name and email that now you can mark as received, as opposed to starting a research project to figure out who's behind the Smith Fund.
Perfect. And on that note, pretty much related to what you just said, when you authorize funds in Chariot, that's it. You're good. Like, you guys kind of take it from there as far as like making that whole transaction work, basically, right?
Yeah. So it's the same. Once that's completed, it's just as if they made a request or initiated a grant within their own portal. So at that point, it just gets approved by the provider. We're doing all the pre-checks on the organization and the account. So it's extremely, extremely rare that something wouldn't ultimately get processed. Obviously, can't say never, but we're helping to ensure that almost never happens.
Perfect. And also confirming, taking this one step back from what you just said, actually, just in the first place, you do have to have an account with Chariot before we can get this on Engaging Networks for you. So you gotta set that up. But once it's all set up, it's all very easy to plug and play, and happy to help you figure that out if you are wanting to get that started for yourself there. And
it's literally on our homepage. I would just say, like, the main button that you can click says sign up or get started. When you click there, you can immediately go through the steps. It takes a minute tops. It's not like a complex sign up process. It's more of like claiming an account, I would say.
Perfect. Got a question here that came in. Is there a report that will include the transaction ID from the provider that we can use to match the gift with the payment?
Yeah, so that will go both in your Chariot dashboard and flows through to Engaging Networks as well. So that'll be in the portal, your transaction ID.
Perfect. Thanks for that answer there. And somebody's asking for any recommendations. You have great sites that are kind of doing a great job of communicating about giving via DAF, like that someone who's just really being able to communicate that really well to their supporters.
Yeah, the PanMass Challenge is probably the sets the standard here. I was just going to try to find a link for you all. Because they create assets for their fundraisers, like the participants in the bike ride, to explain to them what DAFs are and how to use them. But a lot of folks also have a really good explanation of donor advised funds on their own website, which I think is helpful to guide people to if they have questions, in addition to having the payment option within their forms. But we can share some links for examples as a follow-up to Austin.
Perfect. Someone's asking, do we, the nonprofit, get notified when someone submits a donation request through Chariot, or do we only know when we receive the check with the transaction ID?
Yeah, Sydney, that's the best number one benefit is immediately. So you'll get an alert. It'll be available on your dashboard. Obviously, whoever's set up managing the account will get that alert. But most of our clients actually will then have someone on their team, like we work with the Michael J. Fox Foundation. Their head of planned giving actually personally responds or sends a thank you to each person that makes a DAFpay gift now that she has that email and can reach out as quickly as she's able. And she told us that she's been tracking and has a 50% response rate to her thank you emails to these DAFpay donors, which is super high. And she's like, mostly, like, wow, usually I never even hear from an organization after I make a DAF gift. They're not in that stewardship loop at all. So that's really a big part of the benefit here.
Amazing. And we've got just one more minute here, but I just wanted to ask, just very big, high level, what was like one of the biggest, most surprising takeaways you had in completing this benchmark study that you'll soon be releasing? And you may have even covered it in the slides, but just to kind of put like, what was like one big number or one big trend that you kind of noticed that was just like, wow, that's surprising?
Honestly, the most important thing I took away from it is how much work we have to do as an industry in standardizing and implementing best practices around how we track this data. The amount of work we had to do to clean up the data set provided from organizations was pretty shocking. And we're working with some of the biggest organizations in the country. It's not it's folks that have whole gift processing and database management teams. And so knowing that, we know there's all that the whole rest of the sector they don't have best practices to follow. And I saw a few people said in the chat that was really helpful to them. So maybe it makes sense to do a shorter follow-up at some point about it. But some of the stats I shared were the most compelling that came up, but the biggest takeaway was like, whoa, we have a lot of work to do so that we can do more of this analysis on an individual organizational level. And as a sector, we have to get on top of tracking the data, because otherwise it's kind of a mess right now, to put it bluntly.
That's great. No, I mean, it's all new territory, right? Everybody's trying to figure this out. And I have to say, I feel like there's like some like super villain opportunity here to like make names, acronyms that are really close to well-known charities, so you accidentally get $100,000 donation. So just not giving any crazy nefarious ideas, but just throwing that out there. No, this is amazing. Sorry.
No, that has happened before. Someone who was like sent to jail for pretending it was like American Cancer Group or something. They were impersonating. They were somewhere in New York City that were like setting these up. So anyway, we don't need to talk about fraud opportunities, but someone has had that idea.
That is crazy. And yeah, I mean, gosh, I guess that's the world we live in. But anyways, no, this is outside of that, really, I mean, everything has just been amazing here, Mitch. And can I just ask one last thing before we close up, is when will the benchmark report be fully ready, and how can people download it? How can they refer to it?
Yeah, mid-July, I'll drop the link to register, because we'll send an update out about that. And then maybe even just Engaging Networks can share once we have that webinar scheduled to review the results, so that people can see that. So yeah, very exciting. First of its kind of data, and the first year. So we'd also invite, by the way, if folks are interested and they would love to participate, we'll immediately be taking requests to join for next year. So look forward to it.
So cool. And there's so much more we have to talk about. So I'm sure we'll have to have you on again, Mitch. Thank you so much for being here. And as a reminder to everyone, recording will be in your inbox tomorrow. You can share it with others. And let us know if you have any questions along the way. But thank you again for being here, Mitch. And we'll hopefully be able to talk with you again here soon.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Austin. Bye, everybody. Thank you for having me.